My name is Sister Ginger DeGravelle. I'm from South Louisiana. I went to Mount Carmel in New Iberia and was taught by the Sisters of Mount Carmel for 12 years. When I was a junior, Sister Hyacinth announced to our class one morning that our Mother General would be coming to visit us after recess. And during recess, Sister Hyacinth told me that she wanted me to go talk with Reverend Mother after she left our class because she felt that I had a vocation. I was very surprised at that because I couldn't see it in myself, but Reverend Mother came and she did speak with the class and she invited those who were interested in religious life to go talk to her. I did, and I just always remembered that Sister Hyacinth had that impression. I graduated from high school and went on to college. And when I took the entrance exam at the University of Southwestern Louisiana, which is now the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, one of the questions in the psychological test was, what 3 things would you wish for if you could have 3 things that you wanted? And I remember that I said good health for myself and my family, financial security, and the third was to go to heaven. I always remembered that also. I went on and majored in accounting and general business at the university, and after that I worked as an accountant and later on as the director of volunteers at a hospital in Lafayette. I stopped working in 1988 to take care of my parents, who were elderly. All through the years I stayed in contact with Sister Hyacinth. My parents came to live with me, and in 1990 my mother had a massive stroke. She was badly paralyzed, and I cared for her in my home for 14 months. My father, who had been in excellent health, just got progressively worse. He eventually just gave up and died in October 1991. And my mother lived 3 months longer than he. She died in February of 1992. I let Sister Hyacinth know when my parents died, and about 2 months later she wrote and asked if she could come spend the weekend with me. So of course I was happy to have her, and we were visiting the first day she came, and I asked her how many there were in the novitiate at Mount Carmel, and she said, "We don't have any, would you like to come?" Well, that floored me because I was 52 years old and I really thought I was too old for religious life. I had given up that idea years before that. So Sister Hyacinth asked if I wanted to come. I realized then that I needed to be open to every option. So I told her that I would be interested in seeing the Vocation director, and she referred Sister Aloysia to me, and I met with Sister Aloysia every month. And about 3 months later, she suggested that I see a spiritual director every month also, and I saw a Marionite sister for spiritual direction. At that time, I was also considering marriage as a possibility. I knew that I had to be open to anything. And along those lines, I thought the way to meet the best prospect might be to go to church singles groups. There were 2 Catholic churches in Lafayette that had singles group meetings every week. There was an Episcopal singles group and a Methodist singles group. So I really was working hard at that also, but that just didn't feel right. I went for several months, but I don't know, I wasn't able to find the right person. In the meantime, I was still working on this religious vocation to see if that was a possibility. And after seeing Sister Aloysia from Mount Carmel for 4 months, I told her that I was discouraged because I didn't feel pushed into religious life. I was always interested in it, but I felt nothing moving me to take any step toward that vocation. So one night I was sitting in my bedroom just thinking about, what do I need to do to hear the call? Sister Hyacinth would keep asking me, have you heard the call? And I didn't know what to listen for. So I thought, well, I can't hear a voice calling me, so maybe I can pick up my Bible and be fortunate enough to open it to something that would speak to me along the lines of a religious vocation. So I had the Bible on the floor right next to my chair, and I decided that I would open it in the New Testament, and I would look down the first column on the left the middle of the column. And lo and behold, when I opened the Bible, it was Luke chapter 12, and right in the center of the first column was the title, Trust in God. It was verse 22 to 34 that I read, and it was, trust in God, do not be anxious for your life, sell your possessions, and work for the kingdom of God. And I was like in a state of shock. It's like, if I had really tried to find that passage, that's what I would have looked for. It's exactly what I was hoping to find. That was the beginning of several little miracles that happened, and in fact those little miracles continue to happen. But several days after that experience, I was walking with my neighbor. Every evening we'd walk about a mile in the subdivision, and she mentioned to me that she had gone to confession that day, and she told our pastor that she didn't always listen when other people speak, and he told her to draw an ear, and every time she looked at that ear, to let it be a reminder that she needed to listen. So I said, well, Camille, I'm guilty of the same thing, but I never thought of confessing that. I didn't think that was a sin. Well, the very next day I went to confession at a different church. I was going to Mass at a different church, and there was a priest there hearing confession. So he was a foreign priest. And when I told him that I didn't always listen when other people spoke, he said it's important to listen because sometimes God talks to us through other people. Oh, then I thought, well, I guess that means that if God doesn't call me directly, maybe I can hear the call through other people. And that's exactly what started happening. Like within 2 weeks, about 5 people, friends and relatives, asked me if I had ever considered religious life. They knew that my parents had died and I was there looking for some direction in my life. So I took that as another sign that I could possibly be called to religious life. It was just unbelievable that after being told to listen to other people to be able to hear God, I was hearing that I might be interested in religious life. Another little miracle that happened, it was the feast day of the guardian angels on September 29th, 1992. I went to noon Mass in Lafayette, and I was going to visit my sister who lived about an hour away in Lake Charles. The homily at that Mass was about the guardian angels, and the priest said that when you travel, it's important to pray to Archangel Raphael for safe travel. So as I drove to Lake Charles, I prayed for safe travel. I spent the night there with my sister. The next morning, I left there planning to go to noon Mass in Lafayette. I left later than I should have, and I had to drive really fast to get to church on time. Of course, I prayed to Archangel Raphael for safe travel. I pulled up to the church parking lot at about 2 minutes before Mass and parked the car, and when I got out, I could hear the sound of air leaking out of my tire. Well, I looked, and my back tire was perfectly flat after I had been driving very fast. I mean, it's like if that had happened on the highway, Lord knows how many people could have been affected by that. I mentioned that I was seeing a spiritual director, and I said to her that I was so grateful that I had so much goodness in my life. I had wonderful parents, wonderful teachers, wonderful friends, wonderful bosses. It's like everywhere I went, there was goodness. And she said to me, so what will you do for God in return for all that He's given you? Well, I thought, what could be good enough besides giving my life? And this was the first time that I really started thinking seriously, that I really felt obligated. I have a cousin who's a daughter of charity, and I told her that I was discerning a religious vocation. And she gave me really good advice that I would like to pass on to anyone who's considering religious life. She said, you don't have to worry about it. God will lead you. All you have to do is stay focused. Just stay focused on God. My spiritual director gave me a book to read, As Bread That Is Broken, by Father Peter Van Bremen. And there were messages throughout the book that caused me to feel called to religious life. But something happened. When I got through reading that book, I decided to go back and read the foreword, and I have no idea what prompted me to do that, because I don't usually go back and read the foreword, but the last two sentences of the foreword were, "This is a dangerous book. Read with faith and openness, it will cause you to follow him more totally or to go away sad." And I thought, that's it. I felt a very strong call to religious life, and I felt that I had had enough signs, enough miracles. There was no voice directly from God, but I was hearing enough and feeling enough messages to decide that I was interested in religious life. And I felt called to a community with a balance of prayer and active ministry. My spiritual director gave me a directory of women's religious communities in the United States. And when I got to the Benedictine section, it appealed to me. I really was drawn to the work and prayer balance. So I called the Vocation directors in Fort Smith, Jonesboro, and Cullman, Alabama. I decided after talking with those three Vocation directors that I'd like to visit all three communities, but Fort Smith really appealed to me most. I mentioned to one of my friends that I was planning a trip to Fort Smith in April 1993 to visit St. Scholastica Monastery, and she offered to come with me. She said that she could take a week of vacation from work, and well, that fell right into place. So we came in April, and I loved it at St. Scholastica's. It was love at first sight, in fact, and I was here about a week, and I asked Sister Stephanie, the Vocation director, if I could apply to enter on my first visit. So she started the entry process, gave me a 3-hour interview, and she asked me to return in June for Sister Kimberly Prohaska's first profession. Her first profession would be June of '93. So I went back to Lafayette and met one of my neighbors who asked if I had been sick. She said, "You weren't at church during the week, and I was wondering if you were sick." And I said, "No, I had gone to Fort Smith, Arkansas to look at a Benedictine community there." She said, "Oh, if you ever have to go back, I'll be happy to go with you. I have a sister who lives in Fayetteville." So that fell right into place. In the meantime, I decided to go to Jonesboro and Cullman, and apparently that wasn't meant to be because I couldn't find anybody to go with me. I must have made 50 phone calls, and I'm not exaggerating. I mean, I just could not find anybody. It finally worked out, but there were complications all the way, and as it turns out, I did prefer St. Scholastica's in Fort Smith. So I returned in June and took the psychological tests, and I was reminded of the entrance test that I took in college, where I said the third thing that I would choose would be to go to heaven. And I thought, well, this is really something, because if I enter religious life, I can work on that one, trying to go to heaven. The next thing I had to try to work out was to find somebody to live in my house. I made probably 100 phone calls without success to find a single woman who would take care of my house and yard, and that is hard to find. Finally, I realized there's no way I could do it, so I put it in God's hands. It was like 1 month before I was supposed to enter, and I couldn't find, I had just exhausted every possibility. So I said, "God, if you want me to go to Fort Smith, you'll just have to find somebody. I can't do it." Well, about a week later, my brother called, and he said that there was someone who was being evicted from her apartment because the landlord's daughter was moving in. My brother said, "I work with her sister, and I can tell you that she would be a wonderful person to take care of your house and yard." So I called this woman, and she was as excited as I was. She came right over, and that very day we made arrangements for her to move in. So she moved in about 2 weeks before I left, and she took care of my house for the 6 years that I was in formation. When I made my final profession, I had to give up everything that I owned, including that house. And I have found that God can't be outdone in generosity. I gave up that house, but I feel like I got the better part of the deal. And my only advice to those who are discerning religious life would be to be open to what people tell you. When you do God's will, things fall right into place with without a struggle, and there's a sense of real peace and joy in your life. God would never be outdone in generosity. Just remember that God will lead you. All you have to do is be aware. Thank you very much.